Light was a lively boy who had always dreamed of becoming a successful adventurer to give his family a comfortable life. He left his small village and headed for the city to register at the Adventurers Guild, but the path ahead of him was far from easy. In this world, there were 9 races, and humans were considered the lowest among them, making them constant targets of discrimination and contempt. The moment he set foot in the city, he was confronted by that harsh reality when a beastkin adventurer roughly yelled at him to get out of the way. Even though Light wasn't blocking him, he apologized and stepped aside. He continued on until he finally reached the guild and registered as a beginner adventurer. The receptionist explained that all beginners start at rank F and asked if he had a talent that might help with his evaluation. Excitedly, he told her his talent was called Unlimited Summon, which allowed him to bring objects out of thin air. To prove it, he activated his strange device and summoned a card that represented a fork. When he launched it, the fork materialized on the table, but it was bent, leaving him embarrassed. He tried again several times and managed to summon a rotten apple and a moldy piece of bread. The receptionist realized his ability wasn't very useful and assigned him the lowest possible rank. Light accepted her judgment with a smile and asked if there were any jobs he could start right away. She pointed him to the board with simple quests, but when she noticed his confusion, she realized he couldn't read common among humans with limited education. She guided him towards simple labor jobs like carrying stones or gathering firewood, even though the pay was minimal. He accepted, and after a long, hard day, he earned just enough to rent a small room, relying on his talent for food and believing he could endure. But a group of beastkin were waiting for him, intentionally blocking his path until he bumped into them. Their leader accused him of dirtying his clothes and stole Light's money pouch despite his pleas, fearing he'd be left homeless. The leader struck him hard and left him sprawled in the mud. Passers-by advised him to spend the night in the slum area where most humans lived. As despair filled him, a gentle hand reached out to help. He grabbed it instinctively, then realized his muddy hand had dirtied the delicate hand of an elven girl. He quickly apologized, but she reassured him softly, easing his troubled heart in a cruel world. When he couldn't believe her kindness, she bent down and hugged him, while nearby people sneered, appalled that she would lower herself to a human. She helped him to his feet, and behind her stood a diverse group, introducing themselves as the Tribal Union, a legendary team made up of 1 member from each race. They had been looking for a human to complete their ranks. A beastkin named Garo introduced himself first, followed by the elf Sasha, who introduced the rest of the group. Drago of the Dragonkin, Diablo of the Demons, Abero the Oni, the Dark Elf, Nano the Dwarf, and Santor the Centaur. They explained their goal to end discrimination and build a world of equality. To Light, it sounded like a dream too good to be true, but he didn't miss the chance and joined them happily. They set off on many adventures together. Light was the weakest, often protected by Drago and Sasha, who warned him from getting close to monsters. Sasha tended his wounds and constantly told him to stay behind them. Her concern for him became obvious, drawing teasing comments from the others. Flustered, she denied it, and Light felt frustrated that his only contribution was carrying their luggage. But Drago encouraged him, saying Light's delicious tea was reason enough to keep him around, which filled Light with satisfaction as he cheerfully followed them deeper into the dungeon. When they reached a large chamber with only 1 entrance and exit, the team exchanged silent glances, agreeing this was the right spot to carry out their plan. Meanwhile, Light was busy making tea, unaware that this was the moment he'd be cast out from the party. When they told him, he could barely process it, stammering as he asked why they were kicking him out. The reason was simple: he was useless. Insults rained down on him as the group called him and all humans ignorant and worthless. Sasha's gentle demeanor turned into disgust. Her earlier affection now felt like nothing more than an act. They explained that the higher authorities had deemed his unlimited summon talent worthless, and that he wasn't fit for any special position, so they had been ordered to get rid of him. Their earlier kindness was merely a performance to make him drop his guard before betrayal. Their racist arrogance grew as the insults got harsher, and soon they attacked to finish him off quickly before anyone found out the truth. Garo stepped forward, extending sharp metal claws, and slashed Light's face in a flash. The blow made it clear there was no escape. Light ran for his life as their laughter turned into taunting jeers filled with racist venom. Sasha shot an arrow that pierced his leg, sending him crashing down with a cry that echoed through the chamber, while they took twisted pleasure in his screams. Their assault intensified. Garo beat him harder, intending to make it look like Light had been killed by a wild monster, stopping short of real death only because their orders required it. As he crawled, trying to escape, Light's hand brushed against a glowing teleportation circle etched into the ground. Noticing it, they rushed to finish him, but the circle activated just in time, whisking him away to a random spot within the dungeon before their strike could land. His luck didn't improve much. He ended up in the lowest floors, where death waited at every corner. Thinking of his family and the betrayal he'd faced, sadness burned into anger, igniting his will to survive. He stood up with determination to seek revenge and destroy those who betrayed him, but a low growl behind him stopped him cold. He turned to see a monstrous creature at level 1000 radiating pure menace, a mythical beast no novice human could ever hope to face. His heart trembled, but he invoked his unlimited summon skill, pressing the button repeatedly on his device. A surge of unknown power filled him, evolving his skill into something far greater. A massive magic circle formed around him, and the summoning device roared with energy. Just as the beast lunged at him, the summoning completed, and a servant emerged her level, an unbelievable 9,999. The beast's power vanished instantly. The scene blurred before his eyes as the maid bathed in radiant light knelt before him, healing his wounds with her lips, unable to bear the sight of his injured skin without tending to it. Light couldn't believe he was completely healed. The maid asked his name, and when he answered, she smiled with deep joy and swore loyalty to him unto death, in accordance with the honor of her kind. He asked for her name first, and she introduced herself as Mai, the ever-seeking maid, born from an extremely rare summoning card within his unlimited summon ability. Doubt filled Light. How could such a useless skill produce a maid with a level of 9,999? Mai asked permission to use her appraisal ability to read his talent's full details, and he agreed. Using her power, she discovered that his true abilities were sealed behind strong barriers, invisible to anyone below her level. She told him his talent was far deeper and more powerful than he realized, and that its results depended on the density of magical energy around them. The air above ground was too thin in magic, she explained, but deep within the dungeons, it was overflowing, hence why she could manifest here. She praised his bravery for reaching such depths to unlock his potential, but he confessed that it wasn't bravery, he'd been betrayed and cast down. Tears streamed as he recounted how his teammates, who claimed to seek equality, had deceived him. He swore to take revenge on every one of them. Mai embraced him, admitting she couldn't fully grasp his pain, but promised to do whatever he wished, and that destroying those who hurt him would be easy for her. But he refused, not out of mercy, but because he wanted revenge by his own hands, even if he was weak now. Mai knelt again and vowed to help him grow strong enough to fulfill that goal, saying she truly believed in him. Light thanked her sincerely. Having one powerful maid wasn't enough. Light decided to tap deeper into the dungeon's rich magical energy and began summoning more high-ranked maids to build a kingdom that would serve as the foundation for his grand revenge. 3 years passed since that day. Light had become lord of hundreds of maids in a grand palace he built with his own hands, with Mai always by his side as she promised from the start. The maids adored him, cheering his name joyfully, while Mai maintained order among them. One morning, he went to the local market, where shopkeepers greeted him warmly. One invited him for breakfast, and others told him supplies were running low. Light promised to fix the issue quickly, but Mai asked him to leave such small matters to her. He realized that as his kingdom's population grew, a new supply system was needed. He asked Mai about the rest of the legendary summons. She explained that Yuki, the beast tamer, was mapping the areas near the dungeons and monitoring nearby forests for threats, confident in her exceptional skills. She added that Ely, the sorceress, was working hard to develop new magic for his grand plan, despite its complexity. When he asked about Naz, the vampire knight skilled in close combat, but slow to grasp things, Mai told him she had assigned Naz to guard the castle walls to prevent trouble. Light didn't mind Naz's liveliness brought energy to the place. When he returned to the palace, he was greeted by Jack, the last of his 4 summons, who invited him for a new training session. Mai immediately warned Jack about his tone, insisting he address her master properly with the title Lord. Jack ignored her protests, remaining as stern and unbothered as ever. Light told Mai not to worry, saying he thought of Jack as an older brother, then agreed to join him for training. In the training yard, both prepared to spar. Light dashed forward at incredible speed and punched Jack in the stomach hard enough to make his iron body stagger a step back. Impressed, Jack praised Light's strength, saying any ordinary adventurer would have died from a hit like that, though his own tough body could handle it. They met again at the center, fists colliding, and continued trading swift blows, which Jack dodged lightly. Meanwhile, Naz was patrolling the castle halls as usual. Some maids greeted her kindly, saying her presence as a guard made them feel safe. Their words delighted her, which was exactly what they intended, teasing her affectionately. They jokingly suggested she inspect her master's room to make sure it was safe. Naz eagerly rushed to do it, only to meet Mai coming out of the room. Surprised, she asked why Mai was there during Light's training. Mai blushed and claimed she had been cleaning the room while he was away. Naz insisted on checking for herself and stepped in. Finding the bed messy, she asked Mai if she did that on purpose, but Mai quickly composed herself, saying that was just her unique method of making beds. Naz, impressed, asked to learn it, but Mai refused, saying it was a trade secret. Naz then remembered she had a message from the other maids and handed it to Mai. Reading it, Mai realized the maids were protesting her monopoly over the master's room and how she prevented anyone else from cleaning it. Mai calmly told Naz she would handle it personally and gave her some coins to keep quiet. Naz happily accepted and hurried off to the market, buying soft milk-filled pastries and eating them with delight. When she returned to the palace, she found Yuki sitting on a high balcony. Naz asked if she was done with her work in the forests, and Yuki, clearly exhausted, said she'd finished mapping the required areas and came back to deliver them. Naz congratulated her and went back on patrol until she reached the throne hall. Finding it empty, she began shouting freely, then sat on the throne itself, playing with it. She accidentally broke the wing off an angel statue, quickly put it back, and fled in panic, terrified of Mai's reaction. In the training grounds, Light and Jack kept fighting until the latter suggested ending the day and taking a break. They headed to the spacious bath, and as the two relaxed in the large tub, Jack praised Light's rapid progress in gaining skills, confirming that most dungeon monsters no longer posed a threat to him, and that only a few surface opponents could match him. However, he warned him about enemies who hadn't forgotten his downfall and sought to destroy him whenever the opportunity arose. Light's features hardened with seriousness as he recalled the memory of his old betrayal, confirming that he wouldn't rest until he avenged himself against those who betrayed him. In May's rooms, she summoned the 4 maids who had written the letter and confronted them with its harsh content. They became flustered before her and apologized, saying that what they wrote was merely an expression of their support for her, seeing how exhausted she was from work. She responded firmly that she didn't need pity, demanding that each one focus on her tasks and return to her work. May refused the maid's request to clean the master's room. Instead, she punished them by assigning them to clean the hallway, leading to the throne room by hand. They objected that the hallway was far too long, but she ordered them to keep working to stay busy while she went out with Light on a mission. Outside, Naz was pressed against the glass of a shop, staring at a metal gauntlet she wished to buy, but her money wasn't enough. While she was absorbed in staring, she bumped into Ellie, who asked her what she was looking at. Naz pointed at the gauntlet, then wondered why Ellie had returned early even though she was supposed to be overseeing the new construction work. Ellie answered that the work was going well, so she took the opportunity to have a short break. The conversation quickly turned into an argument about which of them was closer to the master and more important to him. Ellie confirmed that she was directly participating in the revenge plan he was putting together, and that she had spent an evening with him drinking tea and discussing progress on the work, adding that she planned to prepare a special dinner at their next meeting. Naz felt jealous and announced her desire to have tea with him too, pointing out her skill in close combat and offering her help whenever Ellie needed it. Ellie smiled, confirming that she would take advantage of her offer at the right time. Then Naz returned to her usual daily rounds. In the palace, the 4 maids were plotting against May again, and began whispering that she was as strict as history's tyrants. They thought about complaining to the master about her, but fear of her punishment dissuaded them. One of them thought that the reason for Light's attachment to May was that she was the first to summon him, while the one with purple hair added that summoning Yuki took 2 months after that, meaning they had spent a long time alone in the dungeons. Their jealousy ignited, and they thrashed about in envious madness before starting superstitious rituals, repeating words to get rid of May. It didn't last long before May heard their whispering and burst into the room. They panicked and began apologizing, insisting that only their jealousy had driven them to talk. She explained to them that their imagination was misplaced during the 2 months between her summoning and Yuki's summoning. Light had spent all his time studying magic and learning combat arts without paying attention to anything else. The maid's tension eased a bit, but May clarified that she hadn't been as harsh on them as they thought, and now it was clear to her that she hadn't been strict enough. So she ordered them to clean the throne room as well, since they had time to practice superstitions. They complied silently, fearing her punishment, and began working until they finished cleaning the entire hall. While wiping the throne, the one with green hair dropped the broken angel wing that Naz had shattered before. The maids were terrified, thinking the fault was theirs, and wondered what May would do to them if she found out. The next morning, Light entered the dungeon to find Naz, Ellie, and Yuki waiting for him. He greeted them with a good morning, and Naz and Ellie soon returned to their usual bickering. Suddenly, a monster emerged from the shadows, and Light froze when he realized it was a hellhound. Despite his current strength, the sight brought him back to the terror of the past, and his blood ran cold. His companions, however, became enraged that the beast had upset their master. Naz drew her sword, ready to cut it to pieces. Ellie announced her intention to erase this species of creatures from existence, while Yuki wondered if she could push the beast into the depths of hell itself. The creature backed away in terror under the weight of their crushing aura, but Light calmed them and regained his composure. He approached the beast and patted its head reassuringly. He knew that one joke from him was enough for his legendary summons to wipe out an entire species of creatures, so he chose to be cautious. He finally turned to them and ordered them to move toward the surface, announcing that the hour of revenge had begun. Garo was walking through the town of the demi-beasts, and in his role as the hero of beasts, everyone flirted with him and showed admiration. A man from the end of the alley offered to trade his sister to gain his favor, but Garo wasn't interested right now. He spotted a human rummaging through garbage looking for a bite to eat, so he turned down another path to knock him to the ground and spit on his face for fun. After that, Garo and his followers entered a private room to start polishing his reputation, so to speak. They told him they were amazed at his transformation from a poor kid from the beast districts to the most likely candidate candidate to become the next president, and that the village chief himself had acknowledged his strength, so they asked him how he'd come this far. Garo bragged that he chose his jobs based on gut instinct, like the one 3 years ago where he was paid a lot to pretend to join the race unity party, and all he had to do was get rid of a human who was supposedly some lord. It was never clear whether Light had died or not, but as far as Garo was concerned, in his weak state, it wasn't possible for him to survive out there alone, so he decided to forget about the boy. Minutes later, May entered the room asking about Light, so Garo's followers got angry and insulted her right to address him that sharply, but Garo didn't mind because he wanted to hear what she meant. May explained that she was a maid serving Master Light and made up a story about Light being from a noble bloodline and that she was traveling the continent searching for him. Garo showed his doubt because those who hired him for that job 3 years ago had done extensive research on Light, and there was no mention of any noble affiliation, but May's appearance suggested she was a maid from a wealthy household, so it seemed like a good opportunity to make a lot of money. He asked her what she wanted. She said she discovered that Light had died in the cell 3 years ago, and she wanted Garo to lead her to his last location to pay her respects. She offered to pay him solid gold for the trouble, but Garo's instincts warned him that it was a trap. It seemed suspicious that she'd pay all that money just to get them to a cell. Since May looked like an ordinary human, Garo lessened his suspicion, since he didn't see anything in humans capable of defeating him. He agreed to lead her to Light's last known location, but he stated that he wasn't doing it for the money, but because Light had been a good friend, and he wanted to help as much as he could. May knew everything he said was a complete lie, but she stuck to her role and thanked him. A month passed as they approached the place where Light had disappeared. Garo had no intention of fulfilling the terms of the agreement. He decided to attack May there and leave her to die like Light had died. When they arrived, May fell to her knees in despair, imagining what Light must have felt back then. Garo tried to weave a story about a beast attack and Light falling into a teleportation trap before anyone could save him. And while he was talking, some of his men started blocking the exit so May couldn't escape when they attacked. They were about to pounce on her. Suddenly, May said that if only she had accompanied him from the beginning, he wouldn't have been deceived or disappointed by the likes of these people. Upon hearing this phrase, Garo got confused and backed off, because no one except the defeated party members and the higher-ups knew the truth of what happened here. He demanded to know how she learned that and accused her of spying for one of the other races. May felt insulted. She was and still is a loyal maid to Master Light with her entire being, and for Garo to compare her to something else was a crime punishable by death. Garo felt a terrible pressure coming from May, and despite her being an ordinary human, his instincts told him he needed to retreat immediately. The moment May was getting furious and covering the wall with demi-beast blood, Light suddenly appeared, ordering her to stop because Garo was his personal prey. Garo and his men were stunned no one had heard him approach. Garo couldn't believe his eyes, since it hadn't crossed his mind that Light had survived at all. Light stood coldly, announcing that he'd returned for revenge, so Garo laughed mockingly and considered it a joke that a human at level 15 thought he could take revenge on an opponent whose level was 150. Garo didn't understand how Light had managed to get this far, but he was certain that if he killed Light now and brought his corpse, he'd be promoted to president rank quickly. Light sighed and asked him if he really wasn't going to ask about the secret of his survival before resorting to violence, but Garo assumed he'd survived by luck and that May had saved him after he teleported through the trap, which was what actually happened. Garo ordered his men to attack, so two immediately pounced, but their heads separated from their bodies before they got close, with a quick strike from May. The rest couldn't follow her movement and started to panic, so Garo ordered them to calm down and claimed that what happened was just a coincidence. Meanwhile, Light thanked May for taking the initiative to protect him, then asked her to guard the exit and prevent anyone from fleeing because he'd handle the rest himself. Garo tried to reassure his men, confirming the impossibility of losing to humans lower in rank than them, but Light got fed up with his repeated talk about his superiority over humans, when in reality he was the weakest. Garo refused to believe that because everyone knows humans are weak, and their magical energy is limited compared to other races, so they couldn't be stronger than Light. So Light asked him, if he really believed that, then how did the heads of two of his men roll on the ground if they were all stronger than him? Garo answered that what happened was a careless mistake, then rushed with his men toward Light. The latter closed his eyes and crushed them effortlessly, like someone chasing dogs, barely lifting his hand. Garo fell to the ground stunned, having taken a blow stronger than any previous blow without realizing where it came from. Light stood over him, asking if this was really the best he and his supposedly superior race could offer. Garo couldn't stand Light's condescending look, so he used his last card by crushing a necklace in his hand, releasing through it a giant creature of the Fenrir type, said to be level 500, to kill Light on his behalf. He arrogantly declared this was the end of the road for Light, but Light told him that level 500 wasn't even enough to pose a challenge to him. Garo thought fear had made his opponent lose his mind, confirming that Light wouldn't be able to defeat that creature alone, and ordered him to kneel and ask for a merciful death if he wanted to escape torture. Light saw that the difference in power hadn't become clear yet, so he set his staff aside and said he wouldn't move from his spot, and invited him to use his strongest attack. Garo still thought his opponent was pretending to be confident, so he gathered tremendous energy in a beast's howl strike that was enough to wipe out a small fortress, and launched it at Light. The dust cleared after a moment, and there was Light standing as he was, unharmed, and not having moved an inch. He considered Garo's bragging about that attack shameful, and even wondered at his calling the creature a Fenrir, when it was nothing more than a weak pup of its species. He pulled out a summoning card and said he'd show him what a real Fenrir was, then summoned a mighty wolf ranked as Lord of Wolves, whose level was 9,000, exceeding anything Garo had seen in his life. The wolf breathed in the direction of Garo's creature, and the latter immediately froze inside a block of ice. Then Garo realized the size of the mess he'd gotten himself into. Light told him that summoning the Lord of Wolves was just for show, because he could have eliminated Garo's creature himself if he wanted to. And to show the real difference between them, he activated his status screen in front of him, displaying that he was at level 9,999. Terror seized Garo then, as he hadn't even known that levels could reach this point, and he began to think Light wasn't human but a disguised being. But that didn't matter in reality, as Garo put his weapon and pride on the ground and knelt begging for his life, claiming he was just following his country's orders and wouldn't have betrayed it if not for those orders, and raised his face looking for mercy that might not come. Before that could happen, Light had some questions for Garo. The first was about the lords whom his superiors had ordered him to search for, but Garo had no information to offer, only saying he knew nothing. This was followed by a question about why the superiors ordered Light killed, despite confirming he wasn't a lord, and Garo repeated in his answer that he carried out what was asked of him without deeper knowledge. Light turned to the rest of the demi-beasts, asking about their knowledge of the matter, and everyone tried hard to lie, hoping to gain pardon, but May finished them all off with merciless cutting for their audacity to claim honesty in Light's presence. Light returned to ask one last question, warning that May's inner eye could detect truth from lies, and that the consequences would be terrible for anyone who tried to deceive. Light asked Garo if he thought he could wage war against the surface nations in his current state, and Garo hesitated before answering that his tremendous power gave him an advantage at the start of the battle, but he would lose in the end because he was just one individual without soldiers or weapons, or enough element to seize victory, over a nation with armies and military power. The answer didn't surprise Light, it was expected, so he pulled out a teleportation card and transported Garo and May to the throne hall. Garo collapsed in on himself from fear of what he dreaded, then opened his eyes and was shocked by the sight of Light's army and its majesty. Light advanced toward his throne and called on his followers to display their levels so Garo could grasp the real power. And most of Light's ranks exceeded level 5,000, with their weakest no less than 1,500. Before this scene, the same question came back to Light, and Garo's face answered with what was enough for Light to know the truth. Light didn't really grant mercy, but stepped back from the promise of mercy for one moment, then changed it to continuous torture that made Garo beg for death. Garo realized he had no ability to face that, as Light at that moment had become like an unstoppable lord. Light returned the next day to his birthplace, searching for his family to take them with him to his dungeon city. However, what he found was nothing but burned ruins and decomposed bodies. It turned out that the village had been wiped out about 6 months earlier by unknown forces, and no one survived. Light searched through the rubble for bodies to bury them properly in a funeral befitting them, and found some comfort in not finding any trace of his siblings, so he hoped that they might still be alive somewhere, while his father and mother were among the victims. Gold asked his master if he was okay, realizing the situation was hard on him. Light answered that he would hold himself together, and that they now needed to focus on the mission, asking Gold and Neom to gather as much information as they could. He knew his army could match the armies of the world, but he saw it as reckless to wage direct war without proper preparation, so he wanted to know the strengths of other nations and their details. He was certain that the destruction of his village was connected to him being accused of being one of the masters, so he decided to uncover what this title was, and why blood was spilled because of it. He swore to himself that if it turned out to be a conspiracy by power-hungry tyrants, he would burn the world to ashes and force the culprits to swallow its ash. Gold realized the extent of his anger and warned him not to let his energy leak in front of people, because just its emission could kill ordinary humans. Light apologized and pulled out a mask known as the Fool's Mask to suppress his energy and hide his identity. Then he stood before his parents' graves apologizing for his inability to save them, before taking off with Neom and Gold, flying toward the city of Dagas. Neom asked what Light planned to do there. Gold told her to be careful calling him that while they were on the surface. Light explained that he would use the name Dark to hide his true identity from prying eyes, and Neom nodded in understanding. He clarified that his goal in Dagas was to register himself as an adventurer under the name Dark, to gradually climb the ranks and gather information from the guild's higher-ups. After some distance flying, Neom spotted the city's horizon, so Light pointed out they needed to land in the forest to avoid attention, even though Gold's shiny armor would make them stand out anyway. As they crossed through the forest, they came across a scene of a human merchant being robbed by a group of dwarves. They tried to avoid interfering, but the gleam of Gold's armor drew attention to them, and the situation turned against the thieves, who ended up tied up in the middle of the road. The merchant and his son thanked their rescuers warmly and offered to accompany them to the city as a reward for their kindness. On the way, the boy described his admiration for Gold's skill in taking down the dwarves with stunning ease. His father thought they were a famous adventurer group, but Light told him they hadn't registered yet. The man expressed his surprise, then explained that Dagas was the ideal place to register because it housed one of the largest guilds and was located on the border between the elf, dwarf, and human kingdoms. It had a large percentage of humans, making it the most welcoming city for them. He also told them he ran a hotel specifically for humans there and invited them to stay if they needed shelter. After a short time, they arrived at Dagas and headed to the city entrance on foot, leaving the dragon to fly away. Neom and Gold saw the surface for the first time, and the city spoke to them through its stalls filled with armor and weapons, which Light explained was due to the abundance of adventurers and proximity to the dwarf kingdom specialized in blacksmithing. When they reached the guild, Neom noticed humans being scattered and avoiding passing other races, so Light concluded that treatment here was harsh despite the calm facade. He approached the registration desk to begin his path as a beginner adventurer. He was assigned a starting position at beginner rank, so a series of quests awaited him to raise his rank. But the first need was shelter, so he remembered what the dragon had mentioned about his hotel, and they headed there. He approached the dragon with a request to rent the entire top floor and prevent any entry to it, even from hotel staff, and placed a bag of gold in front of him that raised surprise. The dragon hesitated about accepting such an amount, but Light's insistence won him over, so the dragon swallowed his objection and prepared the rooms. In the upper room, Light placed sensory reversing spells on the windows to prevent eavesdropping, leaving behind a calm that allowed him to sit and rest. Neom saw danger for Light on the surface in his hesitation, and thought to herself that his return to the lower city would be safer, but her suggestion was understood as an attempt to marginalize him from his revenge plan, which stirred great anger in his chest. She realized her mistake and begged his pardon for her rudeness. The tension built up until Gold intervened with light humor, expressing that Light had a tendency to take revenge with his own hands without intermediaries, so the intensity of the situation lessened, and the atmosphere turned into something like a calm settlement. Light bowed, apologizing to Neom for his outburst, realizing what she said was out of concern for him. She acknowledged the mistake was hers because she overstepped her bounds by speaking, and begged him to allow her to renew her loyalty to him. Light didn't see the necessity in that, but he agreed. So Neom gently lifted his foot and kissed it, as kissing the foot in this world is considered the highest symbol of respect for a leader. However, Light wasn't comfortable with this custom, as he remembered how strange the situation was the day his followers lined up, one after another, performing the same act, when summoned for the first time. Even Gold found the scene odd, especially since Neom seemed to be enjoying what she was doing more than she should. The next morning, they headed out toward the dungeon. As they crossed the city streets, people's gazes rose toward them. Gold's shiny armor attracted a lot of attention. Neom was extremely beautiful, and Light looked strange with the mask covering his face, but it fit perfectly with his new identity as Dark. Long lines formed at the dungeon entrance, and Gold noticed the complete absence of elves. Light explained that an ongoing dispute between elves and dwarves over ownership of the dungeon made both avoid each other. Neom praised his wisdom in every answer. Light thanked her politely, then asked if it was necessary for her to get so close to him that her body touched his head. She answered that her duty was to protect him at close range at all times. Before he could respond, he spotted 3 people cutting the line. One short in stature, who seemed like a servant, another who looked like an apprentice, and the third a warrior with sharp, confident movements and a heavy weapon on his back. Some humans were afraid to object to him for fear of his brutality, but Light didn't care about that, and stood in front of him objecting to his behavior. The elf became furious that a human dared address him, and reached for his sword, but the old man accompanying him discouraged him from causing chaos, so he returned to the end of the line, muttering an explicit threat that Light would regret insulting him. After the elf left, the humans standing in line thanked him for his courage in confronting the tyrant, and the children they had met before came to express their gratitude after being unable to do so earlier. Light said what he did was for personal reasons and not for praise, but they remained grateful. One of the children asked Gold if his armor was made of gold. Neom answered that gold was too weak to make real armor, and before the child could embarrass him with another question, his friends interrupted him. However, Gold intervened, laughing, declaring that he indeed wore the armor just to attract attention, as there was no color more fitting for a knight who aspired to be a shining example. The children asked if this was their first time inside the dungeon. Light confirmed it and inquired why they thought so. They explained that the floor was vast and adventurers had to camp in it, while Light's team didn't carry any camping gear, so they concluded they were beginners. Then the guard called the next group to enter the dungeon, so the children said goodbye and headed inside. Light looked at his companions, wondering if they should carry fake bags so they wouldn't be thought of as amateurs. Despite having everything they needed inside their magic boxes, they didn't want to be considered beginners. Then they advanced toward the gate when their turn came to enter. This was the first time Light had entered a dungeon since going through the depths of the abyss. As dungeons are known for being filled with mana energy that becomes denser, the deeper one goes, leading to the generation of monsters and traps in their depths to become a world of their own. As soon as they reached the first floor, Light cast a concealment spell on all of them to avoid being tracked by enemies. Then they took off flying toward the second floor. At the same time, the elf who had confronted Light earlier was venting his anger on a group of orcs, not believing that a human had dared address him with such boldness. His name was Kito, and he claimed to be a legendary hero from the elf kingdom, with what was believed to be Master's blood running through his veins, and he saw himself as worthy of reverence. He blamed his weak level for what happened, but Yanni reminded him that reaching level 1500 was considered very high for his people. However, Kito saw it as still not enough, as he wanted to possess enough power to crush everyone who mocked him. Yanni expressed sympathy, as he shared the desire for revenge against those who rejected his research and exiled him, so he offered to use his research to help him raise his level further. Meanwhile, Light and his companions had reached the third floor after defeating hordes of orcs. Light saw that it was time to return, having gathered enough evidence to present to the guild, and the battle had covered him with dust, so he wanted to shower. As soon as Neom heard that, she quickly offered to wash his entire body when they returned, but he ignored her in silence. On the way back, they met the children they had encountered before and joined them, but a huge noise roared from deep in the forest, and dozens of wolves came running toward them. The children shouted that they should retreat because they couldn't fight them, but Light pointed out that the real danger wasn't the wolves, but the larger creature approaching behind them, a giant insect with 4 deadly scythes.